Okay. So I've gone on a rant before about Triple H, and I did it, and I was pretty pissed off at the time actually, because I get emotional about this guy. He really angers me, and I'll tell you my frustration. My simple frustration, and this is true, which is ironic that I've said this. Okay, Kurt Angle is my favorite WWE superstar, or one of my favorite WWE superstars of all time. I really want them to come out with a DVD for Kurt Angle, because he was such an important part of the latter end of the Attitude Era, specifically 2000 to 2002. Even into 2003, where he did some of his best work and some of the best work of any wrestler in the history of the industry. After that, his career, which a lot of younger WWE fans are, they're more familiar with, he became known as just this magnificent in-ring performer. But prior to that, he was an all-round entertainer, and he still maintained being sometimes a really, really brilliant entertainer, both on the stick and in the ring. But here's my issue. Okay, I can kind of go and look at a couple of lists here. Some lists that WWE put out. And I've watched every single era, as I said, of wrestling, really. I mean, I've seen, since obviously I was born, not every era, like going all the way back, but I'm even familiar with, wrestlers such as Freddie Blassie, who, was on the 50 greatest of all time list, and I saw many younger commentators on the 50 greatest list, which is a joke, and I've done a video about that. If you want to watch it, please do watch it. It's interesting. I did my own 50 greatest as well, but in any case, Freddie Blassie. A lot of younger fans were saying, hey, he shouldn't be on the list. And I'm probably guilty of that as well. We're all guilty, because our generation's wrestlers are always going to be, to us, the greatest wrestlers. So if we don't know somebody from the past, and we're like, who was he? He's not a star. Nobody knows him now. So, there's that kind of element of, surely the people that are known more should be are worthier of being on the list. But Classy Freddie Blassie, for instance, is one of my favorite WWE stars of all time. I wish they would put a DVD out on him. I don't know how much it would sell. Unfortunately, it probably wouldn't, and that's why they won't put a DVD about him out. But in any case, he's one of my favorite WWE superstars of all time. One of the greatest mic talkers, and as I said, it's great. I saw a picture on the Rock DVD, where it's Freddie Blassie and the Rock, and there's a picture of them, and you can kind of, it's almost like Freddie Blassie was passing his spirit over to the Rock, and just an incredible mic worker, one of the best heels of all time. Classy Freddie Blassie was the original Rock. In the same way that, superstar Billy Graham was the kind of mold for Hulk Hogan's and Macho Man's of the world, and Classy Freddie Blassie was the mold, the type. When you look at someone like The Miz or CM Punk or The Rock, or anybody who's kind of like a flamboyant, arrogant talker, $1 million man, all of these guys, they watch tapes of Classy Freddie Blassie. He's one of the best mic talkers of all time. in any case, so I'm going back to, you know, as I said, like this kind of, the whole theme of these videos is the kind of rewriting of history that the WWE is trying to propagate, and specifically with Triple H. And I was saying to you before that Kurt Angle is one of my favorite wrestlers of all time, and about his work that he did in the early 2000s all the way to 2003, and then his in-ring work is impeccable, as pretty much everyone agrees on that. And I'm desperate for them to put a DVD out about this guy. Now, I've heard on the grapevine that Triple H and him don't get along. They never did. In fact, Triple H was one of the reasons why he was being edged out of the business very, very slowly, even though he was still over towards the end of his career, and is probably respected as one of the greatest wrestlers of all time, you know, by numerous publications regarding his career. You know, he is up there as, you know, wrestler of the decade, you know, you name it. But Triple H doesn't like him, and this is I'm letting out why I personally got really pissed off with Triple H. This is one of the burial jobs he's done, but he's done many other burial jobs, not just of people currently that he wrestles, but burying the history of the WWE so that he looks a certain way in comparison to other people. And the WWE goes along with it, and I can see it on its fingerprint on every DVD they release, on every material that they release about the era, on his DVD. It just all comes out, and it's amazing to watch as you kind of see it, how he's just burying periods of WWE or WF history that were so entertaining just to suit his ego, and present himself as the greatest. Either, I don't know what he's going for. Either he's going for the title of the third greatest, just after Stone Cold Steve Austin and The Rock, or he's going for the greatest of all time. Maybe I don't know what exactly he's trying to achieve. Either way, at the YWC, and as I've seen, and I commend you guys on, aren't buying it. By and large, you aren't buying it. Even the younger fans can see through it, which is great. But in any case, so I don't want to go through this logically. I'm taking way too long to explain this, but okay. So Kurt Angle and him didn't get along. And I am pretty sure the day that Kurt Angle said that he is going to TNA was the happiest day in Triple H's life. Now, it has been said by Jim Ross, amongst others, while he was still working in talent relations, that the WWE has no interest in signing Kurt Angle back, even though Kurt Angle has come out on a number of occasions saying that he is willing to, he wants to end his career in the WWE. He wants one final run, which would be great for the young talent, would refresh the product by miles, because he's such a great in-ring worker, and he can work with young talent, you know, work with young talent, and also that rub of greatness can go off on them in the same way as The Rock or Mick Foley or something like that. But you know, WWE as an organisation are not interested whatsoever in signing him after. And many people would say, oh, okay, this is because of the DUI and he's controversial and he's pissed off Vince McMahon. But he's openly apologised for a lot of the things he said about Vince McMahon. And he's a big draw. Clearly, he'd be a very, very big draw in WWE. Every day I'm looking at, every time I look at a Kurt Angle clip, there's at least 20 people saying, hey, You know, I wish he'd come back to the WWE. You know, they'd like uh, every match or whatever. There's, oh, I miss Kurt Angle in the WWE. So he'd obviously be, you know, somebody that people would be interested in seeing again in the organization. So Vince McMahon has always, whether it be Bret Hart, Stone Cold Steve Austin, a number of different, even people like, you know, people who weren't even big draws. Well, Ultimate Warrior, but I'm trying to think, there are people who weren't even RVD. You know, RVD is amazing, and don't get me wrong, I love the guy, but even him, you know, like, they'll let them back, you know, and for who Kurt Angle was and the status that he had in the WWE at the time, it is ridiculous, the notion that if his contract ends and the WWE don't sign him back, I know for a fact it is Triple H and his jealousy that is the reason why this guy isn't going to be let back in the WWE. And for all the fans across the world, just because of Triple H's fucking ego, we're not going to get to see one last run of one of the best of all time in the WWE. You know, lots of people have gone to TNA and come back. Mick Foley has done it. Booker T has done it. A number of different other people have done it. Why wouldn't they have Kurt Angle? He's the biggest one out. Well, apart from Mick Foley, he's the biggest one who's gone from TNA and back. These are questions to be asked, considering Razor Ramon, you know, like for instance, who went to WCW, people who have betrayed WWE a lot in a lot of ways, you know, have been allowed back into the WWE, you know, without a problem under Vince McMahon. Why is Kurt Angle going to be singled out of all of those stars, being probably the biggest one out of all of them? The guy is in the 10 richest wrestlers in the industry. That goes to show the caliber of what he's considered to this industry, and yet he's not going to be allowed back in the WWE. For what reason? Give me, if anyone can write me a reason why that is. Okay? And now we go on to WWE's releases. The first and most obvious one was putting Kurt Angle and Mick Foley at number 34 and 33 respectively in the greatest of all time, top 50 greatest of all time. And then I can understand Triple H's place in the greatest of all time. I'm not even going to say anything. I think he's number 12 or something like that in the greatest of all time. I'm not going to say I don't understand that. I'm not even going to say that he shouldn't be bigger than Mick Foley or Kurt Angle. I wouldn't think so. I think Mick Foley especially is far more mainstream than you know, and is far more well known outside of wrestling than Triple H. So I don't see how, you know, you can put Triple H above him. The guy's a more transcendent star. He's a bigger star. His book was the biggest selling out of any WWE superstar. It was in the New York Times bestsellers list. His memories of what Mick Foley did when he was in the WWE are probably more well known than a lot of images of Stone Cold. I mean, Stone Cold, that image of Stone Cold fighting Tyson is probably just as iconic, if not less iconic, than Mick Foley Undertaker throwing Mick Foley off the Hell in the Cell cage. That's true. That's true. Okay? Now, when it comes to history, you know, we all know it's written by the victors, and we know that when you write history, images are a very, very powerful and impressionable thing. Now, everywhere you look in terms of WWE material, what comes up a lot of the time? especially when we're talking about the Attitude Era. Oh, Stone Cold does, The Rock does, Mick Foley does, DX does, Triple H does. But where's that guy who was outside of The Rock and Stone Cold and Triple H, the guy that was always in the title picture? Where is he? Where's the top 4 biggest draws of the Attitude Era? Kurt Angle, The Rock, Stone Cold, and Triple H. Apart from the obvious like Mick Foley and Undertaker, but those were guys who were created outside of the Attitude Era. So they were prior. They went in. I'm talking about people who are just Attitude Era. Like that was when they really made their name. Okay. Now, Kurt Angle. Let me give you an example. Kurt Angle was so big in 2000 in terms of his first year, his rookie year in the WWE. He was so over that by the end of it, he was world champion in a championship picture that included Triple H, The Rock, and Stone Cold. And you're talking about Triple H, a man who loves to bury people, as we all know. And Kurt Angle emerged out of that picture as the champion at the end of the year. Can you explain to me why on DVDs concerning The Rock, concerning Stone Cold, on DVDs concerning Triple H, why isn't there chapters on Kurt Angle? Why isn't there a chapter on their feuds with Kurt Angle when they were clearly very, very important parts of the whole history of these characters? Clearly they were. I watch the Stone Cold one, for instance, and there's this whole comedy segment which I think Michael P. Hayes says it was one of the biggest bits of business they did on SmackDown, which was the comedy segments between Stone Cold Steve Austin and Kurt Angle. And respect to Stone Cold, because he actually considers that like a big part and an important part of his career, and was willing to mention it and say how much fun he had doing it with Kurt Angle and stuff like that. But again, they try and make it out like, oh, Kurt Angle was just this peripheral figure around the corner of that. No, he was right at the center of that. He was part of what made that angle amusing, and the feud that went on between Kurt Angle and Stone Cold after that, after they got out of that, was a very, very interesting part of Stone Cold's career. It was actually more interesting than that whole thing with Triple H, where Triple H, had an interesting feud with, funnily enough, which isn't on that DVD for some reason, where he runs over Stone Cold Steve Austin, and that was the most interesting feud he had, and it culminated in some crap matches, which is probably why it's not on the DVD, because I'm sure if he could put himself as much as possible on everyone's DVD, he would. But it culminated in some very, very forgettable matches, and that's why it isn't on there. But that feud between Stone Cold Steve Austin and Kurt Angle, that came out of that angle where they were doing this backstage comedy, and the invasion, was all very interesting parts of the whole narrative of Stone Cold Steve Austin. Why isn't it on the DVD? Why is Triple H all over these DVDs? Like he was the only one who was feuding with these guys as the top heel during that time. There's so much of Triple H that you just see his fingerprints on all the products, and how he's messing around with history and the truth about you know, where people are at. And, you know, even with John Cena, which is the only person he will accept. And this is what I say, this is why I always say, because I forget to point this out, Triple H, John Cena is what Triple H really dreamed of being. He is Triple H's dream. He doesn't care how he does it, what effect it has on the product, if he were the right person or not. He wanted to be the face of the company, no matter what. Whether he was the most talented, whether he would make the rest of the roster more money, whatever it took for him to be considered the top guy in the industry, he was willing to do. And that's why he squashed so many people. And it started from the very, very beginning of his career. He tried to, The Rock became a jobber to him, and that was probably politics to do with the clique. I don't know if The Rock accepted it or not, but The Rock lost to him in the ladder matches and a number of other matches when it was the Nation feuding with DX. And then, lo and behold, The Rock came out as the much hotter act of the two of them. It continued on and then became really massive when Stone Cold and The Rock's careers were petering out. Because this was a time where Triple H was arguably, because of how he had booked himself during the Attitude Era, he was arguably the biggest star in the company, as The Rock was going to Hollywood and Stone Cold was going, off. And that was where he could really throw his weight around. He could really then get into throwing his fucking weight around, in terms of burying other talent, taking on all the good storylines, making sure certain wrestlers stayed in, certain, like say for instance SmackDown, when they wanted to, go to another place. In fact, Booker T, who we all know famously was buried by Triple H, left to go to TNA because they tried to put him on the ECW brand. They tried to make Kurt Angle the face of the ECW brand, the second biggest heel, or even arguably, in the latter end of the Attitude Era, Kurt Angle was probably the most over heel in the company. And what do? They try and make him. I can't remember what year it was. Maybe 2006. They try and make him the face of the ECW brand. They send him over to ECW as if he has no place in, say, for instance, a title picture, after he just feuded with John Cena for the championship. These things just seem like they have Triple H's fingerprint on it somehow. I don't know what, how, or why, but they seem like they have Triple H's fingerprint on it. He selected some guys who he saw as equal to himself, because apparently he wanted to just continue wrestling and not get into movies. And The Rock apparently, which he constantly brings up because he knows it hits a nerve with fans, so he constantly kind of brings up, but I never really wanted to be in the movies, I always wanted to be part of the wrestling industry, I'm just a workhorse. Why the fuck then were you trying to get to be Thor in the Marvel movies? Like they would ever fucking put Triple H as Thor in the Marvel. This is why he came out with that entrance, or the entrance into WrestleMania, the WrestleMania where he fought John Cena in his whole Thor costume, to show like these guys that I can really do it. This guy was really politicking to get into the Thor movie as Thor. Like anyone was ever going to buy that. This guy really, really wanted to get into the movie industry. He was desperate to. He was in Blade 3. He was trying like The Rock to get into it, but he just wasn't charismatic enough and wasn't good enough. And that's the constant thing that we have to go back to in Triple H's career. The guy is not good enough. He's good, but he's not great. If he wasn't with... This is a fake sport, okay? A fake sport. And somebody... Look at now. John Cena, for all you want to say about him and his 13 whatever world championships that he has now, almost rivaling Ric Flair. Whatever you want to say about that guy, the fact is he's the face of the company. Triple H has never really been the face of WWE. At best, he was the face of the Raw brand. Okay? He wasn't the face of SmackDown and Raw. He was the face of the Raw brand with his whole period as Evolution. How the fuck has this guy got 16 world titles? How has he? How has he got more titles than The Rock or Stone Cold Steve Austin? Okay, he's been there for a long time, but he should have been retired, right? Like quite a while ago. How has he managed to get all these titles? And people say, okay, he was already successful before he got with Stephanie McMahon. First of all, he was in the Clique, okay? So the Clique were a very, very powerful group. If you know your wrestling history, the Clique, Shawn Michaels, Kevin Nash, Razor Ramon, Scott Hall, were very, very powerful group, ex-Pac in WWE, and could ride roughshod over it. They came up with this DX idea, you know, and then there was the NWO angle, which was much more successful, I think, than DX ever was. But DX was not that great. I mean, the greatest parts of it had Shawn Michaels in it, but they weren't that great. They weren't that entertaining, and everyone kind of marks out like DX were this amazing thing. And I just don't see, like, you compare what DX were doing to what The Rock and what Stone Cold were doing, and there's no comparison. It was shit. It was bollocks. What are you talking about? The corporation where you could argue that Triple H was perhaps at his most entertaining and his best, where he was clocking up world titles when The Rock was supposed to be the man. You know, he was the champion, trying to be the best heel. He realized that he wasn't talented enough to be the greatest face, so then he was like, okay, second best thing, I'll try and be the best heel of all time. And then he got fucked over in that, because he wasn't as good as The Rock as a heel. He wasn't as good as Stone Cold as a heel. Stone Cold was the best heel in 2001. I would argue, many people would argue against this, that Kurt Angle was the most entertaining heel in the year 2000. It was not ever Triple H was the best heel in the business. The best heel in the business in 1999, 98 was easily The Rock. And then before that, he was doing this Blue Blood, you know, angle where he was, you know, Lord Triple H or whatever. So he was never really that great a heel. In the Attitude Era, maybe you can say, okay, in Evolution and all of this kind of stuff, he came out and became a really good heel. I don't think he was that good a heel then. I think he just put himself in the title picture a lot and had some good storylines, but it wasn't that great. You know, and as I said, you know, we're talking about Stephanie McMahon now. And Stephanie McMahon, and when the first time, because people like to, again, there's this revisionist history, and I think it's a part of, like, oh, he was already successful and he was on his way up. Yes, he was on his way up, but people were bettering him, and McMahon probably wouldn't have gone with him as world champion for as long and for as many times as, you know, if he hadn't have married Stephanie McMahon. He never had a world title. The Rock had a world title before him, even though The Rock was never planned to. There were more plans for Triple H to take that place than for The Rock to. and Triple H wasn't willing to put The Rock over anyway. There was more plans by them, but The Rock was just too good, so they had to make him corporate champion. Okay, and it was only after in 1999 when him and Stephanie did this angle, and then they started getting together. And I think they were together before then. To be fair, I don't buy all this bullshit that they started this angle and then art. Life imitated art. They were together before then. I'm sorry. They just, I don't buy it. I think that's all part of the whole thing to make it look better. That he started this angle, so he was already in the title picture before Stephanie and him got together. I'm not saying Triple H would never have won a world title, but he was consistently, and I think this is the first time probably in the history of the business where he was not the face of the company, not by a long shot, and yet he was the one who mainly had the title instead of The Rock, who should have rightfully had it because he was the face. He was the one that everybody wanted to watch. I'm not saying there shouldn't have been a struggle for The Rock to get the title, but it was this back and forth, and I'm like, wait a second, there's other people The Rock could be feuding with that would be more interesting than this McMahon-Helmsley era angle, which isn't just puts, it put Triple H on TV more than The Rock. He was on our screens more than The Rock, and I'm like, why? I don't want to see him. He didn't have a good heat. This is another thing I need to explain. Triple H in the Attitude Era didn't have that kind of good heat where it's like, like people were talking about how funny it was or how good that segment with Triple H was. He didn't have that kind of heat. Maybe in DX he had some things where there was water cooler talk about him. I never found DX that entertaining, but that was a group, and that was, as I said, Shawn Michaels and everybody else. But soon, I think, as I said, The Rock and Stone Cold eclipsed him as stars by miles. Okay? He gets into the title picture once he has been involved with Stephanie, proceeds to not lose clean to The Rock for the title. The Rock never really technically won the title straight off Triple H, pinning him for the 1, 2, 3 himself. It was always some other thing, and again, this is another point I always make about Triple H. Triple H has got to be one of the only heels in history that doesn't lose clean regularly. Yeah, he's lost clean sometimes, but not regularly. Every time, much like John Cena, there's some kind of excuse or reason that he lost. There's always something there that it wasn't just him, that something else happened, and there was this, and then McMahon got involved, and blah blah blah, or he got hit by a chair, or there was outside interference. He never loses clean as a heel. Yet the face of the company, the baby face, he's the one, in the case with Triple H, who actually ends up losing. He ends up losing. He ends up beating the baby face regularly, clean, just straight up clean. I think The Rock is the only one he didn't lose, he didn't win clean to. But all the rest of the baby faces, Jericho, etc., down the line, he would beat clean. Of course he put over Batista, he put over Shelton Benjamin, so there's an argument to be made. But if you compare how many people Triple H has put over, and put over who are really a threat to him as well, you have to remember, are these guys actually a threat to him? When he's got somebody who's actually charismatic and is getting over, I don't know if he put over Eddie Guerrero ever. I don't know if there's a match between them. I'll be surprised if he did. But people who are genuinely a threat to his position, he never puts them over clean. He never put over Kurt Angle clean. You know, he never put over Mick Foley clean. You know, he never put over Mick Foley at all. He never lost to him. He never put over The Rock clean. He didn't put over Stone Cold. Stone Cold hasn't beat him. After he married Stephanie McMahon, Stone Cold never beat him. You know, Jericho took his title when he was at the height, and then starts proclaiming this, I don't know how long, where he was, you know, the figurehead of Raw, as if he was the man of the company, the face of the company. He wasn't the face of the company, because there was SmackDown, another brand which was equally as watched. SmackDown was actually relevant then. It wasn't just Raw that was the most, you know, watched every week. Go back and look at the numbers. Eddie Guerrero was on SmackDown, the SmackDown brand, and Eddie Guerrero, during the earlier part of 2003, 2004, before John Cena came on the scene, Eddie Guerrero was probably the most over guy in the fucking company. You know, Eddie Guerrero could have easily, because they were going to put on the title on him, and then there was the drug kind of thing, but Eddie Guerrero easily could have been contender, you know, for one of the faces of the company. He was probably as over as Brock Lesnar, as over as anyone in the company. You know, all of these things have to be taken into consideration in the life and times of Triple H, because when you're complaining about, and I want to finish this video by saying this, when you're complaining about John Cena and how he's burying, and how he is, you know, burying the roster. He's always on top. He's got 13 titles, trying to convince you he's the greatest superstar of all time. The propaganda, the revisionist history, all of these things are direct blueprints adopted from the career of Triple H. John Cena is Triple H 1.0, a man who cannot accept that he is not the man. He just can't accept that he is not the man and never ever will be. Even to the point where he is willing to erase, change, dabble with, and ultimately rewrite the past, so as to defend this unjust position that he's put himself in. You know, he's not the man. He's not the man for the job. He's not the right man for the job. That's what he can't accept. He never was the right man for the job. Even if Stone Cold and The Rock had not come along, Triple H still wouldn't have been the man for the job. And to be honest, we'd be talking about WCW and Goldberg right now, and how Goldberg buries everyone. That's what we'd be talking about, because WWE probably would have gone under if Triple H was the guy. And that's what I'm saying. The blueprint of John Cena, the original, is Triple H. He got it from Shawn Michaels. Shawn Michaels, you could possibly say, got it a bit from Ric Flair, but like, that's the lineage, man. Shawn Michaels, Nash, Triple H, John Cena, and now maybe they'll try and bring Randy Orton into the fold of that as well. That's the truth. Alright, the next video, hopefully people will actually watch these videos, but the next video is going to be on the WWE and Vince McMahon, and the focus is more going to be on John Cena's career now, and seeing how exactly he's adopted these strategies so wonderfully employed by Triple H, really expertly employed by Triple H, of rewriting history to serve their own purpose. Okay, thank you. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video.